Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Science at One. I'm Will, and if you've listened to the show before, you might know that it's produced by SMP students, so that's Science Media Production Master students at Imperial. And normally we give you the latest science news, gossip and analysis from Imperial and beyond. But as I said, today's a very special show, and we're going to do something slightly different. Because, in fact, last term, as part of our course, we had to produce each a radio package. And we thought it would be a really nice thing to do to showcase the radio packages that we all made and to air them live on the radio. So we've got a whole range of different topics for you, and it's going to be really exciting. So I think, before we get into that, we should kick things off with a song. So this is Supermassive Black Hole by Muse. What a tune that was. That was Supermassive Black Hole by Muse. It was written by the lead singer and principal songwriter Matt Bellamy, and it was released as the lead single from the band's fourth studio album, Black Holes and Revelations. So obviously Muse had an interest in black holes and based their music around it. But I wonder whether they even thought it was possible to make music based on the data collected from black holes. And that's exactly what our first radio piece is all about. And it was made by Aaron on the course, and this is his introduction to it. 56 million years. That's how long it would take to get to the nearest black hole. They exist on the edge of what we conceive, but we can now hear them. The release of techno EP Micromedes marks the dawn of creative science. The album is the first piece of music ever compiled from black hole data. Our science correspondent Aaron Comer has been investigating whether it can truly reveal the secrets of our universe.
Black holes ain't as black as they are painted. They are not the eternal prisons they were once thought. Things can get out of a black hole, both to the outside, and possibly to another universe.
Stephen Hawking challenging long-held views about the inescapable blackness of black holes. These days we know that black holes give off valuable data, for instance when they collide with each other and unleash ripples through the fabric of space-time. We can detect these gravitational waves on Earth, and we can turn that data into computer simulations, numbers on a screen, or music. Haunting, beautiful electronic music like this.
I was playing piano, I think, from when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I got very interested as a teenager into quantum physics.
That's mathematician Valery Vermeulen. He's also a DJ and composer. He brings together black hole data and music in his new album Micromedes. He's sonifying black holes. It's not just about making music, but using sound to help us better understand the quantum world.
Quantum gravity is a theory in which scientists are looking for ways to combine quantum physics, so that's the world of the very tiny, small, microscopic world, and general relativity, basically the theory that describes everything that is super heavy. But if you have a black hole, that's basically you take a bunch of mass, you compress it to a super, super tiny region in space, you get something that's super small, and at the same time you get something that is super heavy, and you would need a theory that encompasses quantum physics and general relativity. And up to now, there is no one who has come up with such a theory.
Whilst mathematicians like Valery are trying to understand quantum gravity, astrophysicists are using the same science to perfect the next generation of computing, quantum computing. So what can quantum computers do for us?
Okay, so there's two answers. The propaganda answer is they can do everything. And the honest answer, I would argue, is they can solve a certain class of problems instantly, where current computers or other methods, like humans, would need a long, long time. Cracking a password, these quantum computers just solve it. Whereas these problems, they would not be within reach of current computers. It would take on the order of longer than 100 years or so to solve any such problems.
That's University of Alabama astrophysicist Mateusz Kaminski. He generated the simulations used in Valery's track. Quantum computers are therefore a glimpse into the future, but black holes take us back to the deep past. That's because of the unusual movement of particles within their cores.
When you smash heavy ions into each other and you create a state that's called the quark-gluon plasma. So these particles are strongly interacting with each other, and we believe that that is the state that was present right after the Big Bang. So it would be a great benefit to understand, like, where do we come from? How did we come into being?
So how does all this link back to the Micromedes album? Well, the music allows scientists to easily identify trends in black hole data through extremely high or low pitch sounds. Therefore, data becomes more presentable and understandable for developing theories about black holes and quantum technology.
We often, as scientists, have that problem to even communicate data to other scientists. Like, whatever shapes, whatever connections I see, it's difficult to find the right graph to plot on sometimes. And so I think that sonification can help reveal those patterns to either colleagues or the general public and make it more accessible.
How do you let data that have no auditory presence of their own speak for themselves? How do you do that?
That's sonification expert Paul Vickers from Northumbria University, who warns that sound isn't a faultless method of communicating science.
Black holes don't have any sound, so any sound you pick is a deliberate choice. You are choosing to say this sound stands for that phenomenon. And how you do that kind of colours the way the audience is going to receive it. So you could make black holes sound very scary by using dark, ominous, rumbling tones, and this would sound very boomy and spacey. And because of the way we're used to experiencing sound in the real world, we associate certain sounds and certain types of music perhaps with certain emotions and feelings based on our prior experience. And it's impossible to avoid that. But unless we go to the effort of learning what it actually means, what it's telling us and how it's being composed, I don't think we're going to go beyond that level other than, oh, well, this is something to do with black holes and it's kind of mysterious.
Therefore, black holes are still on the edge of what we know, but thanks to creative science, we are always finding out more. Go and listen to Valerie's album on Ash International's Bandcamp page to explore the mysteries of space.
Well, that was a really interesting piece, and in fact I've got Aaron with me now in the studio, so welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Will. It's great to be back. Haven't been here in a while.
I know, this is reminiscent of last term when we presented the show together, isn't it?
Yeah, now I'm a guest and it feels quite weird to be a guest sitting on the
I'm
line.
sure. But no, it was a great piece, and
Thank you.
I suppose the first question I wanted to ask was, where did you first hear about the EP and kind of what inspired you to make your piece about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I started, I wanted to do something like really like interesting and like wow.
Yeah.
So I was just doing all these like weird searches for things. But one of my mates works as like an audio engineer, so I was thinking, is there some sort of like science and music thing that I can do? And I was really like going into the depths of SoundCloud at midnight and just trying to find anything I could.
Yeah.
And I stumbled across this because I think in 2017 he released an album of the same, but it was based on the sounds of the Space Explorer.
Oh, I see.
And now he's done it with black holes, so this is a kind of thing he does of like making space music.
Yeah, I see. And I suppose the big question about it is, what is the value of bringing together what some would consider quite disparate things, music and science, bringing those two together? Like, what do you think that the value of that is in terms of science communication, I suppose?
It was quite interesting because sorry for the astrophysicists out there, but it's hard. Like, it's really difficult to understand.
I don't think anyone would dispute that, even the astrophysicists.
It's really difficult to understand, really difficult to communicate. So the point of putting science into music means that people can relate to it more. People can hear it and think, oh, that sounds cool, and want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
And it just sparks a general interest for like the public and stuff like that. But I think it is also important for scientists because then they can like understand culture more and think about how they can relate it. And I think it's something that's quite a big thing in science, of like putting it into different formats so people can understand.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And what about the actual production process then of actually making this piece? So what challenges did you face?
So one of the main things is the interviews were really, really interesting. They were really, really interesting, and it was really, really enjoyable. But I'm not an astrophysicist, so it's really complex. People talking about like string theory, gravitational force and stuff like that, which I just didn't understand. And putting it into a radio piece, you're also not going to understand it.
That's right, yeah.
So the challenge was like, right, I've got all this information and I'm going to take it, put it into plain English for like 3 minutes of making it. And I think it came across okay. Like, I think you get a basic understanding of it. But that was the main thing of you come out of an interview like, wow, that was really interesting, but now what I'm going to do.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, thanks so much for coming in and speaking to us about that piece.
No problem,
and,
anytime.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much. Right, now then, we're going to move on to our next piece, and here's the introduction. So, over the past 2 years, we have witnessed the impact the media has had on our perception of the COVID-19 virus. It has been called deadly, causing fear and panic. It's been called the Chinese virus, causing Asian hate and xenophobia. This reminds us of the HIV pandemic when it first started gaining traction in the media around the early 1980s. Almost 40 years later, while the virus is medically under control, the impact of the way the virus has been represented in the media is still affecting people who live with it. The media has the power to create the stigma around HIV, so it definitely has the power to break it. Charity Case, Dr. Eleanor Vaughan and Benjamin Ryan will take us on a journey between the past and the present of the media, the stigma and the virus. And this piece was by John Bader.
Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS, started as an exclusively gay disease.
It's mysterious, it's deadly, and it's baffling medical science.
So I'm upset by it. I'm frustrated that since we don't know what the agent is, we don't have any specific therapies.
So far, 75% of cases are homosexuals.
Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant frontman of the veteran British band Queen, died peacefully at age 45 of bronchopneumonia brought on by AIDS.
The test for AIDS costs $160.
I've been living with HIV for the last 2 years of my life.
The first AIDS death in America.
Had gay cancer.
It's HIV positive.
The HIV virus.
Undetectable level.
HIV positive.
HIV.
AIDS.
Since the early 1980s, the media has played a big role in covering the HIV pandemic, as well as shaping the public perception of the virus. It went from being the hot topic on the news as the mysterious deadly virus to being called the gay virus, to making sporadic occasional appearances on media around December, the HIV Awareness Month. While one can say that currently the virus is under control, with the help of effective antiretroviral medications like PrEP or PEP, the stigma is still spreading, and its effects on people living with the virus are far worse than the symptoms of the virus itself. Charity Case, drag queen and contestant on the third season of Drag Race UK, has been living with HIV for many years.
My experience with HIV began when I was 18 years old. I'd moved to London about a year before that, and I was kind of like experimenting on the scene, getting dressed up and partying, but I had a bad experience with being taken advantage of one night at a party, and it ended up with me contracting HIV. And what was even worse was realising the stigma around HIV after being diagnosed. And at that point, I was really uneducated around HIV. So yeah, it was very eye-opening for me. It took getting HIV to learn about it, and that's a problem. That's a massive problem.
The stigma that Charity felt after being diagnosed can be partly explained by the way people living with HIV are represented in the media. Dr. Elena Vaughan from the National University of Ireland in Galway sampled 103 news articles published in Ireland.
What we found was that there was this real dominant theme of risk, and that this was applied to people living with HIV or people kind of affected by or maybe disproportionately affected by HIV. And so what we found is that there was a tendency within the sample to construe or to portray the acquisition of HIV as being a consequence of risk-taking. And the implication is that the responsibility for avoiding HIV infection is solely centered on the individual and on their individual behaviors and actions. And this is slightly problematic, I suppose, because it deflects from those wider social and structural pieces that are real determinants of health. You know, we know that there's certain things that create barriers to achieving good sexual health, but one of the structural barriers would be access to education, for example, would be a very important one, sexual health education. It also speaks to this morality piece, because if you say that somebody is taking risks, and you can blame them then for those negative health outcomes. And so that creates that dynamic where that shame and blame piece is allowed to flourish. And that is really kind of what underpins a lot of the stigma surrounding HIV.
Science journalist Benjamin Ryan thinks that effective science communication over the past 2 decades and campaigns like U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, have actually improved the public understanding of the virus and got us one step closer to tackling the stigma.
Well, I think things have really improved in the coverage of HIV. There has been a huge activist push that's been extremely successful to publicize these scientific findings that finally proved that if you are on antiretroviral therapy, if you have HIV, and you have a fully suppressed viral load, that you cannot transmit the virus. So that has really filtered through so many media outlets, I think quite successfully. And I think people have increasingly come to understand that, and that really does affect stigma, because it takes the conception of somebody living with HIV, it changes it away from the sense that they're some sort of vector of transmission, and really kind of reinstills their humanity, if you will, because the fear of infection has been at the core of stigma toward people with HIV since the very beginning. So that kind of reporting, I think, has really improved things of late. But, you know, there remains a stigma amongst people about having gay sex and about having sex outside of marriage and having sex for recreation.
I think there has been improvement. I'm seeing a bit more, discussion of PrEP. I'm seeing more discussion of, U equals U, and, these positive biomedical developments. That's still, that's beginning to kind of come to the fore a bit more, which is a positive thing.
So it seems that the conversation about HIV is shifting. But as for positive media representation, is there enough of it?
Certainly not enough.
Well, certainly not enough.
I don't think there's enough people with living with HIV on TV. And if there was, it was about a HIV scare. But had there been other people talking about it on TV, I probably would have known a little bit more about it before I was diagnosed. So, not enough.
For that reason, Charity Case decided to open up about her positive HIV status on Drag Race UK on national television.
It's been so touching that so many people connect to my story and that I have helped them, like my trauma and something that I went through that was really hard for me is in some way positive now to some other people or to the general opinion of the audience watching. I know for a fact that hundreds and maybe thousands of even conversations happened that day, and the following week about HIV that had never been had before.
I think it's great when public figures come out. I think it's really important for people living with HIV to be visible.
Anytime you could put a personal face on some stigmatized condition, that's going to help people see someone's humanity as opposed to just the virus.
I think it's undeniable that a lot of people get their information from the media and from narratives.
My role is to just keep speaking out and keep using my platform for the best and, keep being a representative of somebody living with HIV who is happy, healthy and safe.
And that was John's package about HIV, and it's obviously such an important topic, and anything that people can do to reduce the stigma about and start talking more about it is a good thing. But we've obviously clearly got a way to go still. Right, now in the spirit of sort of being free and living your life the way you want to, this is Work of Art by one of my favourite musicians, Jamie Cullum.
Whoa. Gonna tell you where we are. Come on and love me, we'll go far. There's an ocean underneath the sea. Put me in your narrative. Paint your sunset golden red. There's a beautiful world for us to see. What you saying? So can you hear me? You gotta jump right in if you're gonna find the loving that you need. I wanna live my life like a work of art. I wanna live my life like a work of art. If there's just one thing to give you any truth, Come on and live your life like a work of art. There's sunshine in my veins that's never gonna be contained. That sounds like paradise to me. Those secrets in my brain tell me we're all the same. The more you sing, the more you're free. So what you saying? Can you hear me? You gotta jump right in if you're gonna find the loving that you need. I wanna live my life like a work of art. I wanna live my life like a work of art. If there's just one thing to give you any truth, come on and live your life like a work of art.
That was Work of Art by Jamie Cullum, and it was released in 2019. So, next up, we've got another radio piece by Zoe Castledon, and actually, one of her contributors was Rob Miller, who's also on our course. So, this is the introduction for that one. Plastics had a bit of a controversial run these past couple of years. Ever since David Attenborough dropped Blue Planet 2, there's been a huge push of people to reduce their use of plastic. But how exactly did something so bad become such an ingrained part of our everyday lives, and is trying to get rid of it only causing more problems? We'd love to hear your takes on plastic waste. Anyway, here's Zoe Castledon with the story.
It's all around us. We produce over 300 million tonnes of it a year. It's in our clothes, in our electronics, and in every aisle of the supermarket. It's revolutionised the way we live our lives. But it's also earned itself a pretty bad reputation. I'm talking, of course, about plastic.
The name plastic comes from polymer elastic. So it is a polymeric material, but they have a particular set of physical properties that we find attractive.
That's Dr. Jason Hallett, a professor of sustainable chemical technology at Imperial College London. When he calls plastic a polymer, he's referring to the structure of plastic on a molecular level. To make a polymer, you start off with small molecules. In a process called polymerization, these small molecules are connected to form long chains of thousands of molecules. This structure is part of what makes plastic so fantastic.
And so they can normally be molded into shapes that we find desirable, and they have levels of toughness and resiliency that we find attractive in products. So they can be stretched or compressed without breaking, not very brittle. but rather quite elastic. Our uses for plastics have outstripped our knowledge of them in pace. I guess outpaced rather than outstripped our knowledge of them. And what I mean by that is that we have found ever more increased uses for plastics without having a very deep understanding of where we come from. Where they come from. A very deep understanding of where they come from. Or more importantly, a very good understanding of what we're going to do with them afterwards.
The negative effects of plastic pollution are well publicised. You've probably seen photos of birds with plastic around their necks, or a turtle trying to eat a plastic bag. While these images are shocking, plastic is even worse when it's breaking down in the environment on a level we might not even see.
My name's Robert Miller, and I spend a lot of time researching microplastics and specifically looking into their effect on the environment and how they interact with marine species and their potential harm to humans. So microplastics are basically small plastics that are under 5 millimeters in size. And microplastics can be split further into primary and secondary types. Primary microplastics are purposely produced to be this size. And then you get secondary types, which arise from the breakdown of larger plastics. So I was working with a marine conservation NGO. We would do necropsy research of sea turtles. And through looking at 18 sea turtles, they discovered over 3,000 microplastics. If you look in the last few years, there's been a lot more investigations into how these plastics may affect humans, because in the end, microplastics and nanoplastics will be able to enter the human body through our water supplies or through our food chain. And although there's nothing too conclusive as of yet, researchers started to identify how microplastics may interact with different sites for our bodies, such as the nervous system, and there seems to be some negative effects.
Given these downsides, it's no surprise that people are moving away from the use of plastics. Some countries have even announced bans for single-use plastic. Avoiding plastic is easier than ever. Paper straws and cans of water are just a couple of examples of easy substitutes. But are these alternatives that much better for the environment?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there isn't a single answer. But the plastic has its good points and its bad points. And when we start talking about things like a plastic ban, it's a very short-sighted solution. We're going to eliminate one problem and create a whole plethora of other ones. Plastic is very lightweight. If we switch from plastic balls to glass or plastic containers to metal containers, will vastly increase the weight. And that, of course, leads to a big increase in CO2 emissions during transport. And CO2 emissions during transport are one of the leading causes of CO2 emissions. And so we will increase the carbon footprint of all the products that we make today. So we've traded off water pollution for air pollution. Also, the alternative materials, even though they're more familiar and may or may not be more recyclable, doesn't mean that their production is less damaging to the environment. Glass is made at over 1,000 degrees. It's a very high temperature, very carbon intensive process. Metal is made from refining metal ore, which comes from mining activity, which in my opinion is probably the single most damaging human activity ever. Paper is another great example. I can't remember exactly. I think the paper industry is the 5th most polluting industry in the world. Plastics at one point were considered the environmentally friendly alternative to paper. And so even though the materials themselves may not form these unsightly plastic heaps in the ocean, they're causing damage to the environment in other ways.
If we can't get rid of plastic, we have to find ways of making plastic work for us and the Earth. I spoke to Dr. Sarah Ho, the Development Innovation Manager at plastic technology startup Polymateria, about the ways their product can help solve this tricky problem.
Polymateria provides a tailored biodegradable solution for conventional plastic packaging. So our technology does not require the client or the brand to change the existing plastic resins. Plastic that contains Polymateria master batch is biodegradable on land, leaving no microplastic behind.
While it's in use, a plastic with Polymateria technology acts just like a regular plastic and can even be recycled. But once the plastic's useful life is over,
that's when our technology kicks in. So The technology can break down the polymer into a wax-like substance rather than microplastics. So our technology works in a wide range of plastic type: thin plastic bags, the lids on the plastic bottles, non-woven PP like for face masks, tea bags, and wipes. So it works on a wide range of products.
So it seems like plastic, with a little science and innovation, won't become a thing of the past.
And so I think it's a trade-off there. And so I think we need to be much more holistic about this and find ways to take advantage of the good properties of plastics and mitigate sort of the disadvantage of them. And a lot of that's behavioral. If we could behave ourselves and not throw plastics into the rivers and oceans, they wouldn't cause any problems whatsoever. They're actually very well behaved if you put them where they're supposed to go.
There we go. That was a fantastic piece there from Zoe, and she's joining me now live in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Wow, it was a really interesting piece and some really cool contributors as well, particularly that second one who had some interesting insights to say. Anyway, what I wanted to ask was, what was the most interesting or maybe surprising thing you learnt whilst making the package?
So, one of the most interesting things I learnt, obviously the piece is about plastic, but I also learnt how bad for the environment everything else is.
Yeah.
So paper, I really didn't think about that or really know that paper is one of the most polluting industries.
Right.
So I know one of the reasons I made the piece was because obviously plastic has a lot of talk about it at the moment, how bad it is for the environment. People are using and choosing to go zero plastic, plastic free. But I just wanted to explore whether this was the thing we should be doing or whether it would be more complicated. And of course,
yeah,
it's more complicated.
It's always more complicated. But that's really interesting because, I mean, we kind of focus on plastic, and especially now it's become such a huge thing. And we think we can recycle things like paper and whatever, but what's really happening to them is we don't really know, I guess. And we don't really know the impact.
And the production side, as we're making new paper, because we don't always recycle, is the part where everything really damages the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the sort of production side of the piece, how did you approach sort of your use of music and sound effects? Or
so with the music, I was trying to illustrate the concept of polymerization through music at the beginning, because I understand that a lot of chemistry is not very intuitive to a lot of people, or a lot of people had bad experiences with chemistry when they were in school.
I definitely did.
So I wanted to just use music to try and have a little musical illustration. But for the background music, I think a lot of us, when we were doing our assignments and we had to try and find royalty-free music that we could use, a lot of it is just not very good.
Yeah, that is a big
or it makes it sound like an ad.
Yeah.
So what I actually did was I found some websites that had free beat loops that you would use to make like hip-hop backing tracks.
Okay.
And just put some of those together.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out really well.
Yeah, no, it does. It's a really cool effect. I didn't realise you'd done that because, like you say, a lot of the royalty-free music you find is that kind of just motivational...
Just some corporate jingle.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, thanks so much for coming on and speaking to us anyway.
Thank you.
Fascinating stuff. Right then. Next up, it's actually my piece. So here's the intro for that, and then we'll go straight into it. So, the sheer beauty of cancer research. That's what visitors will encounter when they cross the threshold into the Outwitting Cancer exhibition at the Francis Crick Institute in London. Opened in September last year, this is the first exhibition of its kind to showcase current cancer research mere metres away from the laboratories where scientists are hard at work. Outwitting Cancer also presents visitors with a unique audio-visual experience. Our science editor, Will Hornbrook, me, finds out what happens when medical research and abstract art collide.
I thought it was really interesting. There was an awful lot I didn't know, because obviously you hear the word cancer, but to see it in detail and all explained in one place is quite different for me. I think it was done in a very elegant way. For me, the thing that sort of, was, really kind of breaking down the stigma was actually just as well being able to kind of understand
what cancer actually is. Because I think, certainly from my perspective, I didn't really know that.
Thoughts there from Jack Hansen and Simon West, visiting the Outwitting Cancer exhibition at the Francis Crick Institute in London. The centrepiece is a multi-sensory art installation. Yasmin Khan is the exhibition's curator.
The immersive experience is quite a critical piece because what we wanted to do is to prime visitors on their way in, to make sure they feel comfortable with the subject. So, as you're coming through the threshold, you're into this sort of like cathedral of knowledge, if you like, the Crick, and it's tackling quite a deep subject. So we wanted to kind of create this artistic piece as a sort of centrepiece of the exhibition. We didn't want to sort of make this into a didactic experience where we'd have a narration and explain what was happening, like, here is some cells dividing, that kind of really kill the moment. So we thought we would do that through music.
Tasked with developing the soundscape for the installation was composer Mira Kalix.
Well, at first, I think it might have even been December 2019, I actually went and did lots of what we would call field recording and went into the labs in the Crick and went downstairs into the storage areas where they're storing all the cells. So they were like opening the little gas cylinders and recording all these things. And so the idea had been to like use a lot of that material. But actually the truth of sort of going into these labs is that the primary sound you hear is kind of the sounds of fans and hums of refrigeration, which is not particularly beautiful sound. So I used a little bit of that in the end, but not very much, because this soundtrack, we should say, it has a musical score, and then it kind of has a sound design element or sort of elements of these kind of real materials, but again, quite abstract.
The final soundtrack blends familiar orchestral sounds with less conventional electronic beats, operatic soprano, and sound design elements. I suppose I wondered what feelings you hope to evoke in people with the music.
I wasn't trying to make people feel anything in particular. I mean, it's only 5 minutes long. With music, it changes quite a lot. I think it was more a case of creating, with everyone else, creating a space in which just to be, which sounds a bit hokey-cokey, but in the context of this, I think it's actually quite important. Also quite adventurous of the Crick, if you know what I mean, to go, okay, well, we've got this, we've got all that information out there, but we're actually creating a space that we're not really telling you how to feel or what to think in this space. So in that sense, it's much more open to interpretation.
Meanwhile, Jack and Simon are making their way around the exhibition. So what do they make of Microcosmos?
It's a little bit abstract. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. It's very well done. It's very artistic. I'm not quite sure what it was trying to say. Sort of celebrating research and life, I suppose, but I wasn't quite clear what it was there for. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I quite like it as a scene setter, to be honest, though. Yeah. I think it's sort of, it moves you into a zone of getting ready to think about some science and some sort of big concepts and big ideas. So I quite liked it. I don't know, if it was just like a sort of little bit of a walk through, 30 seconds to kind of get you in the zone, take you out of, I don't know, the commute to get here or whatever, then yeah, great.
But the Microcosmos installation is not just a feast for the ears. It's a multi-sensory experience. There's an abstract sequence of visuals too.
The key was levering the visual assets from the labs at the Crick. And if I could just quickly tell you a story as to what inspired that vision. When I was interviewing the scientists, one of them was Simon Bolton, who's doing research on DNA damage or repair to DNA damage. And he showed me these magnificent visuals. It was moving footage of cells dividing. And I found that a really moving experience. It was really powerful for me. And it was this epiphany moment that this is amazing. This stuff, this biological phenomenon is happening in us all the time. Can we give the public a window into this research that I have just seen? So it became my challenge and my mission to scale that up, to headhunt more of those sorts of visuals from across the labs. So I started with those, images of the cells dividing. Over many months, we found other beautiful imagery, including cancer cells spreading through the bloodstream, and then eventually T cells attacking cancer cells, and you see the cancer cells sort of shriveling away into oblivion.
When you can put things in a way that someone like me off the street who knows nothing about science can come in and take it, it's nice.
Also, striking a really good balance between the human story and the science, with the impact on the individual as well as the research, but also the people who are conducting the research as well.
Visitors Jack and Simon reflecting on their experience. And for her part, Yasmin says the exhibition achieves everything she hoped it would.
It's a very sort of a warm, tonic space that makes you feel, cared for, and it kind of leaves you tanked up, wanting to kind of ready to dig deeper into the detail of the exhibition. So that's when you then go and see the Encounters films. So yeah, Microcosmos is the artistic highlight of the exhibition, and it's well worth coming just to see it in its own right.
There we go. And if you haven't been to the Francis Crick Institute and had a look at the Outwitting Cancer exhibition, then yeah, I'd highly recommend going. It's a great little exhibit, and it's open now, so check it out. Right, next we've got another song, and this is How You Like That by the K-pop band Blackpink.
보란 듯이 무너졌어 바닥을 뚫고 저 치아까지 엊그처럼 잡겠다고 저 높이 두 손을 뻗어봐도 다시 캄캄한 이곳에 light up the sky 네 두 눈을 보며 I kiss you bye 실컷 비웃어라 꼴 좋으니까 이젠 너희 하나 둘 셋 How you like that? You gon' like that? Da 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 da. How you like that? How you like that? Da 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 da. Now look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. How you like that? Now look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me. How you like that? Girl need a doll and that's 100 패킷 중에 100 내 몫을 원해 Come on get some 난 같지만 어쩔 순 없잖아 What's up I'm right back 방금 sweater cock back Plain drink get hijack Don't like me then tell me how you like that 더 캄캄한 이곳에 shine like the stars 그 미소를 띠며 I kiss you goodbye 실컷 비웃어라 꼴 좋으니까 이제 너희 하나 둘셋 How you like that?
That was How You Like That by South Korean girl group Blackpink, and that was released in 2020. Now, the reason we had a K-pop song there is because of our next radio piece, which was produced by Antonio Falzerano from our course. And here's the intro. Bulgogi, Samgyeopsal, Tang Su Du, Uni, Banchan. Words from a foreign language, right? Well, actually, no. Following the latest update from the Oxford English Dictionary, these words are now part of the English language. 26 Korean words have been added to the dictionary in total, in just the latest example of Korean culture influencing our lives in the UK. Earlier this year, Squid Game became Netflix's most watched TV show, and pop group BTS became the first Korean artist to achieve a #1 album in the UK. Now the spread of Korean influence has reached the Oxford English Dictionary. We sent our reporter Antonio Falzerano to find out more.
So yeah, I think I remember how to use chopsticks. I haven't done it in a while though.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple technique. Just got to hold it like it's a pencil with another kind of pencil underneath.
Yeah, your technique looks a little bit better than mine. If it gets food into my mouth, that's good enough, right?
I think that'll work, yeah.
Neve Coolway is a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford, studying the interaction between East Asia and the West through the linguistics of food.
So the spread of Korean culture, fundamentally, as we call it Hallyu, or the Korean wave, or K-wave, as that word K enters the OED. And it's really spread by popular culture. It's this popular culture online and on video, TV shows like Squid Game, films like Parasite, bands like BTS or Blackpink are enormous, and those cultures are coming out across social media. Young people are really embracing them, and they're, coming into the mainstream now on, British radio stations or, Netflix all over the world.
Dr. Jian Kia, Professor of Korean Language and Linguistics at the University of Oxford, was not surprised when she was consulted by the Oxford English Dictionary, OED, about their intention to add Korean words in their newest update.
When you look at people around us in UK, the Asian population is very much huge. Some of the languages, 7 most spoken languages in the UK, 6 of them are Asian languages, and the 7th, one of them is Polish. So I think this Asian influence, or the sort of non-European culture or non-European language, I think the interest is growing just because we are surrounded by the people who are from non-European part of the world.
If you look through the list of 26 words that have been added, 2 themes emerge: words associated with the internet and words associated with food.
These two kind of link together. They're both based off the increase in Korean popular culture. Food words are so important because food is when we think about a different culture and the way we interact with another culture when we don't live there, the food is such a massive part of it. And also for people from that culture who come over to the UK or to America, food is a way that you show your identity. It's so intimately linked with identity. And so when Korean culture becomes more popular, food is one of the first things we can firsthand experience, particularly during a pandemic. You can cook at home food that, you can't necessarily talk to someone from Korea particularly easily, but you can cook their food at home to get a real smell, a taste. You can listen to the sounds it makes, get a real emotional and sensory response to this other culture. And so food is a really early stage of the way we interact with the language, and so the new words in the dictionary are reflecting that.
But how exactly does a word get added to the English dictionary?
My name is Tadika Salazar, and I am World English Editor for the Oxford English Dictionary. We have different means at our disposal to track the emergence of new words and senses that we need to include into our dictionaries. So, for example, we use what we call language corpora, which is our digital collection of texts that are designed specifically for language research. So we have software that we use to track emerging patterns of language use. So we use the software to analyze billions of words of text that show us, this word is beginning to be used more often in this part of the English-speaking world. But we also use digital databases of newspapers, both historical and current. And we also use Oxford Reading Program, which is a collection of short extracts taken from books and other publications by volunteer readers. We also track social media as well for new usages and words. So Twitter is a really important resource for us, especially for more informal and current usages. And sometimes we also launch public appeals and make some crowdsourcing efforts and ask the public what the words they use that they would like to see in the dictionary.
We've got deep fried chicken, and if we grab our glass of beer and we eat these together, we get chimek, which is one of the big new words in the dictionary.
Chimek.
Chimek. The chi comes from chicken, and the mek comes from the Korean word mekju, which means beer. So that's the word for eating fried chicken and beer together.
Some may be wondering why foreign words are appearing in the English language, but this is by no means a new phenomenon.
In truth, there is no such thing as a purely English word. I mean, English is a mongrel language, as are pretty much all language. No language is untouched by other influences, or very, very few. And you know, if you start saying only purely English words can be in the English language dictionary, I think we'd find it very difficult to say any sentence at all. You know, if you can't have words like bulgogi, a new Korean food word in the dictionary, then you couldn't have pork or apricot that come from French.
The borrowing of words, loan words into languages is a totally normal linguistic phenomenon. That is just one way that people create new words. It's part of the development of English to incorporate words from other languages. So that and the Oxford English Dictionary as a historical document of the English language needs to include all of those borrowings in its pages as well.
To try and ignore that even our language shouldn't have influence from other cultures is just so unhelpful. You know, even if little things like using words that come from a country in East Asia that you've never been to and accepting that into your language and going, you know what, this is what I use every day, this is my various multifaceted influences, I think it just adds to help us all remember just how diverse we really are and how we can't claim anything to be just ours. It's all influenced from so many different places, and that really helps foster that idea that we are so connected and our everyday lives are touched upon by uncountable numbers of cultures and backgrounds.
That was delicious. How do you say that in Korean?
맛있어요.
Like, it really was, and I could not eat another thing.
Dessert?
Well, I feel like I'm right in the restaurant there myself, because Antonio is here with me in the studio now.
I wish we still were. I wish we still were.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Right. Well, that was a fascinating story. I mean, I had no idea about these new Korean words entering the Oxford English Dictionary. So, what inspired you to centre your piece around that topic?
Well, it was a few things actually. During that time, there was a lot. It was a time when Korea, even it's been in the media so much recently, as I mentioned in that piece. So at the time, there was Squid Game going on. There was BTS and Blackpink, who we both heard, just all in the charts.
Yeah, of course.
And at the same time, I moved to New Malden, which is just south of London.
Right.
And it's rumoured to have the highest density of Korean people outside of South Korea.
Oh, I see, right.
So the restaurants and everything around there I was exploring at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, really enjoying that. And then that news story broke where these update to the dictionary, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to send to my piece on.
Perfect, yeah. And I suppose the obvious question to ask is, what's your favourite of these new words you've discovered then?
Well, one that I didn't get to include in the piece is the word fighting. Literally spell Fighting, like English fighting.
Yeah.
And it really shows that kind of transfer of words throughout languages, which is something that appeared in the piece.
Yeah.
Because it came from the English, but then it was picked up in Korean as like a word for like let's go. So they'll shout like fighting. But they don't have the letter F, so it's become like whiting.
Oh, okay.
If I'm pronouncing that right. My pronunciation is still not good enough.
Wow.
But it really shows that transfer of words through a language.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, isn't it? And something you don't really think about day to day, I guess. Oh, well, thanks so much for joining us on the show and letting us share your piece. It was fantastic.
Thank
you. I mean, I think all the pieces we've heard today have been
so interesting and
really
so varied as well. To say with one project we all had the same.
Yeah.
And we've ended up with such different things.
Yeah, I know. And it's really nice to be able to kind of, because we've all gone off and worked on these sort of on our own. And so it's nice to be able to bring them all together and to listen to them all and share them all.
For sure, definitely. So many different voices, so many different collaborators.
Yeah. And I think also a really good skill to learn as well, going off and, getting interviews with people and being able to bring it all together then to tell a story in 7 minutes as well. It's no mean feat, is it?
It wasn't easy, There was a lot of, what was the most difficult part for you in your one, Will?
Oh, I think probably just kind of choosing which bits of the interviews to include.
Oh, me too. I agree.
Anyway, there we are. So I think that brings us to the end of the show, really. Okay. Well, I hope that anyone that's been listening...
What did you learn today? What's a fact you learned today, Will?
A fact?
Yeah, from all those pieces you listened to, what are you going to take home?
That fighting is a Korean word, I think. That's got to be
Correct answer. Correct answer.
And so we will see you next time for more Science at 1. And be at 1 with science.